Before we get started, if you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. Now, let's dive into the recap. A bright yellow chandelier hangs from the ceiling, illuminating the room and making it sparkle with the light of its many burning candles. This is the dorm room of the ruffian son of a high-ranking noble family, who reigned over the Magic Academy like a king. The ruffian son is the story's narrator and technical protagonist. He sits in his large, luxurious dorm room, furnished with grand bed and rich, polished furniture, contemplating his life. Unfortunately, the ruffian's luck has run out, as he has been charged with many egregious and downright unforgivable sins, such as using profanity in the presence of the honorable princess, like a foul-mouthed, drunken sailor, wrongfully meddling in the entrance examination, disregarding decency, and smearing the family name by being blinded by jealousy. All of these are sins that his household cannot overlook. To cut a long story short, he's being stripped from the family register like a harlot because he has caused far more trouble than they can tolerate. It feels like the god of fate is ridiculing me, he laments, his head in his hands. The ruffian's name is Ed Roth-Taylor, and his life is over. He is tossed out of his grand dorm with all his belongings packed into a few brown suitcases, which are also thrown beside him in the dirt. They don't even bother to acknowledge him once they've discarded him. Thank you for your hard work, they say, without a drop of sincerity in their tone. Other students jeer at him when they spot him, some point in shock, while others avoid making direct eye contact, as if afraid of catching a disease only he can spread. Ed has become the gossip of the academy, and some students wonder why they should even bother walking on eggshells around him anymore. After all, he was disowned and thrown out of his dorm room. He has no power left to use against them. They likely won't even see him next semester. Some students blame him for his own misfortune, believing he should have known better than to attempt rigging the entrance exam. They call him a filthy noble. These insults echo through the halls and gardens, reaching Ed as he sits stewing on a bench with his suitcases by his side, a dark, depressing aura surrounding him. Ed thinks this is all unfair, and that sort of thinking is to be expected. After all, the arrogant Ed that all the students are jeering at isn't even the same person anymore. It turns out that the reality where the magical school exists is actually a game, and our weeping protagonist has somehow entered it while playing on his computer back home. The game is set in a magical school called Sylvania Academy, which won the award for Best Game of the Year. Titled The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania, it was his favorite game. Our boy isn't too surprised about entering the game, as he's familiar with this genre from the comics he reads. Usually, when someone enters a game, they end up possessing the abilities of either the main hero or the main villain. It could be someone cool, like the first son of a super-rich family, a genius ruffian, a young clan master, or a triple S-rank hunter character who's badass and always breaks the rules. Unfortunately for our hero, he's drawn the short straw and ended up in the body of a third-rate villain, who gets kicked out of the dorms at the very beginning of the game. He's not even a relevant character. His name isn't cool either, because what kind of name is Ed Roth-Taylor? The developers basically designed him to fail. He has possessed the worst possible character at the worst possible time. It is truly a misfortune to land in the body of someone else just after they've messed up beyond repair. Our hero screams into the sky in protest at how unfair his situation is. He has always lived a frugal and simple life with no greed. However, the other students hear him yelling and assume that arrogant Ed is just boasting again, complaining about unfairness when he has lived a life filled with nothing but wicked deeds. They also mock him for calling himself frugal when they know him as a shameless scumbag. That stops our boy short, leaving him gaping in embarrassment and shock. Spirit broken, he sits in humble silence as the students storm away in anger. Our boy sighs and glances to his side, only to be surprised by a status window opening before him. It tells him that Ed Roth-Taylor is 17 years old, in year 2, and a male of the human race, with 0 achievements. The status window also reveals that Ed is utterly useless, with level 3 stamina and level 4 intellect. However, he does have level 7 talent, level 7 willpower, and a bonus level 6 for luck, so he's not entirely hopeless. Still, my guy is heavily disappointed by Ed's pathetic stats. Despite studying in the Faculty of Magic, his intellect is next to nothing, and his stamina is way too low for a noble. He figures this is why Ed never amounted to anything more than a third-rate villain. Because even in his memories of playing the game, Ed exists as nothing but a blur. It's so bad that he can't even recall what happened to him later in the game. Suddenly, our guy is struck with enlightenment and remembers exactly what happened to poor, useless Ed Rothtailor. In a corner of the game's ending credits, he recalls an elderly-looking man with a thin mustache, wearing a suit and crouching on the street with no shoes. That man was Ed Rothtailor, and his ending was begging on the streets like a bum. Thinking about it logically, our hero deduces that Ed's fate was no real surprise. He had been a ruffian noble who knew nothing about the world, and was suddenly thrown onto the streets. Begging as a bad ending aside, Ed was at least lucky to have somehow survived. However, the revelation remained depressing for the poor guy who was now stuck living Ed's miserable life. He was so terrified of the future that he turned as white as a sheet, sighing once more in disappointment. He doesn't know why, of all people, he has come to possess Ed's body, nor does he have any idea how to figure out the reason behind this mix-up. However, he picks up his suitcase, determined not to let begging become his fate. He stands, determination burning in his pale eyes, and glares ahead. He declares he will succeed no matter what. For they say that once you hit rock bottom, the only place to go is up. Despite being a school, Sylvania Academy is more like a city, with the entire arc and surrounding mountains serving as its premises. The valley is expansive, with green grass growing around the Academy's white, glistening towers. Our guide journeys to the undeveloped forest northeast of the Academy to escape the prying eyes of the students. Covered in sweat and exhausted, he makes it deep into the woods and pauses to sit on his suitcase after walking for half a day. Amazingly, he manages to lug both suitcases all the way out there by himself, despite not being the most physically built noble around. Since he has been disowned and is now the disgrace of the school, he has plenty of time to ponder his next move, even though his odds aren't looking good. Back in the game, Ed's disownment was an extreme starting point for scenario. However, though he was disowned, he was not expelled, and that part is extremely important. Sylvania Academy is a top-tier learning facility, and just graduating from it guarantees a secure and prosperous future. Thanks to our hero's obsession with the game, he can now use the knowledge of a 5-time dedicated player to its fullest. He still has a chance at success. As long as he graduates quietly, he can secure a soft, comfortable life, one even better than the one he left behind in his past world. So his obvious goal is graduation. He scratches that word into the sand, visions of golden towers of coins flashing through his mind. However, to achieve this newfound dream, he first needs to tackle a few major problems, the steep tuition fees being the first. As someone who has been disowned and kicked to the curb, he has absolutely no money to pay for school. It's not like he's talented enough to get a scholarship, either. The good news is that the current semester has already been paid for by his wealthy noble family. That means he has time to secure a scholarship for the next semester. However, Ed's stats are still looking ridiculous, downright depressing, but our boy is not about to give up just yet. Even though he thinks he'd be lucky just to avoid flunking out with stats that bad, he decides to worry about tuition later. Right now, there are more pressing matters, like how he's going to survive now that he's been kicked out of the dorms. What he needs most at this moment: food, clothes, and shelter. Snapping open his luxurious suitcase, he takes stock of what he has to work with for the next week to avoid turning into a bum. Inside, he finds a collection of flashy clothing with no extra stats or powers, ceremonial daggers that are just as useless, and even more useless ornamental cup. It's not looking good, but at least he has clothes. The real problem now is having no place to stay and no food to eat. And with Ed's awful reputation, neither of those things will be easy to come by. Sitting on the ground to ponder the issue, he realizes that, in practice, he already looks like a bum. Since returning to the dorm he was kicked out of is not an option, he decides to camp out in the woods for the time being. At least there's a clean stream nearby. That takes care of his water supply. He has 10 days until school starts, so he's going to use that time to whip himself into shape. Ed starts by practicing the magic spell Windblade. He sends blades of wind whipping through the forest until he is exhausted. Fortunately, he is able to use magic, But using spells only makes him even hungrier. Just cutting down a few tree trunks with wind blade drains him completely. Frustrated, he decides the spell isn't as useful as he thought. Now, he's just annoyed that he got kicked out without even having a stash of food. Then he wonders, does using magic make you hungry in this world? Because after casting just a few spells, he is starving. Sweat starts dripping down his brow. Suddenly, he remembers something his grandfather once told him when he was young. During times when barley was scarce, his grandfather said people in the back mountains would eat tree bark to survive. Ed stares dubiously at the bark of the trees he just cut down. Unfortunately, he is desperate enough to try it. Within minutes, he's using ignition to boil the bark of a tree inside the ceremonial cup. Anything edible is good enough for him to try to fight off the hunger. He is so hungry that he convinces himself the tree bark looks like chicken breasts. Excited, he stuffs the wood into his mouth and chews with high hopes. As expected, his hopes plummet, and he ends up spitting the entire thing out. Humans might be omnivores, but there's a limit. 3 days in the forest, and Ed is starting to look like a starved, reanimated corpse. He sends his hate toward his grandpa for his useless advice. After starving for a day and throwing up for 2 more, he concludes that he should stop trying to eat wood and instead use it to build a house. He needs shelter to withstand harsh weather conditions, so he gets busy. First things first, he raises a frame to support the wood for the house. He only has 2 hands, so he struggles to set up the 4 supports. It's not an easy job, and he quickly crashes during his first pathetic attempt. However, it's either succeed or die trying, so he forces himself to his feet again, his face burning red as he hurriedly ties the frame into place. He takes a moment to rest after that small success, but he still has a long way to go. Since he can't sleep on the ground, he tosses his luxurious clothes onto the floor and uses them as a makeshift mat. It's a waste of nice, fancy clothes, but it's not like he has a choice. The next day comes, and he successfully crafts a tent made of wood, which he's extremely proud of. Suddenly, the status window becomes active and informs him that his crafting proficiency has increased. Since he completed a basic wooden shelter, he is now a novice craftsman with level 4 in handiness, level 1 in design, and level 1 in gathering ability. Ed would be much more impressed if he weren't dying of starvation. He does realize, though, that he missed out on his talents because he was a noble, so he never discovered that he's more skilled with his hands than he is with magic. So, my guy utilizes his handiness and creates a simple harpoon, a ceremonial dagger strapped to a well-shaped tree trunk. He wields his newly crafted weapon like a madman, determined to find something to eat. 2 days on an empty stomach, coupled with excessive physical labor, has been rough on him. Only desperation keeps him going as he madly jabs at the water in a wild attempt to catch fish. He successfully catches 2 and roasts them over a fire using the ignition spell. A week remains until school starts, and he finally tastes food again, so it's no wonder that his eyes are sparkling with joy. He just has to hold out a little longer. If he can manage to endure until then, he'll be able to get through school without much trouble. However, he was so busy eating that he forgot something important, and nearly chokes on the fish when someone appears before him. A beautiful girl with long blonde hair and striking golden eyes. In his desperate quest for survival, my guy had completely forgotten about the main characters of the story. But of all the people he could have run into, he had not expected to meet this particular individual. She is a disciplinarian and strict princess, Phionia, and she is the one who got Ed Taylor kicked out of the dorms. The problem is that Ed Roth Taylor is a villain, who appears as soon as the player starts the game. Using his status as a noble, he hits on the main character's childhood friend, only to end up beaten and punished for it. However, Ed's vengeful heart is not satisfied, and he goes on to use his noble influence to manipulate the main character's entrance exam for Sylvania Academy. Unfortunately, he immediately gets caught by a girl who had come to take the entrance exam while hiding her identity. That girl was Phionia Elias Cleon, the Empire's 3rd princess. With her insight ability, she can detect lies and conspiracies. Pathetic Ed Roth Taylor was caught in a sorry state, gritting his teeth and making excuses, but all of his lies were exposed by Phionia. He was then chased out of the dorms. Everyone at the academy, of course, hated Ed Roth Taylor, but he was truly doomed the moment he met the one person he should have avoided the most. Now, my guy was unfortunate enough to have met her again, while wearing Ed Roth Taylor's body. She is furious to see him, her arms crossing as she immediately assumes he's up to no good. "What are you doing here?" she demands, furious to learn that he was not immediately expelled. Ed explains that he is still a student, even if he was chased from the dorms. However, the princess is not having it. She demands that he leave. She cannot stand to see a shameless person like him around the school. That would be a valid complaint if he were still the scumbag Ed Roth Taylor. But he is a completely different person inside. However, Phionia doesn't know that, and she is determined to talk to the academic department to personally request his expulsion. He is in big trouble now. She will demand that he be expelled for committing a dishonorable act as a student of the academy and for trying to sabotage a fellow student's future. Yet all I can think about is his precious food burning away on the fire. At the same time, he recognizes that his life is in crisis now that the princess is here making threats, because she really does have the power to get him expelled. If that's the case, then he's going to have to get serious. "The sun will set soon," he says, his face darkening as he steps toward her, questioning why a royal like herself is currently unaccompanied by any guards. He turns the tables around and jeers at a noble princess for coming to an isolated forest alone. However, Phionia refuses to be intimidated and raises her hands in battle stance. She's not scared of him, even without her escorts. Still, our hero denies trying to threaten her and suddenly gets on his knees, claiming with a bright smile that he's just trying to thank her. This confuses Phionia, and she activates her insight skill. She is shocked to find that there is truth in his words. No lies are detected. Ed notes her surprise. The Roth Taylor family, to which he belongs, is famous and influential, but they have used their name to exploit citizens and conduct human experiments in pursuit of eternal life. To the main character, it is a trash family destined for destruction, with all its members eventually imprisoned or executed. However, thanks to Ed getting disowned, our hero will never have to suffer that fate. His fish is now completely burnt, and while he may be cold and hungry, he decides that it's better than dying in the long run. Getting disowned was actually a good thing, and it puts a bright smile on his face. He realizes he must convince Phionia without lying or he'll get expelled. And then it's game over for any chance of living a peaceful, happy life. Looking at the timeline, he deduces that it's about a week before school starts. He wonders why the princess is in the forest alone. She has come without an escort and is dressed in simple clothing, which makes him realize she's completing the class placement test. Professor Glass's class placement test requires students to find magic beads hidden throughout the forest. It is a brutal test, and he knows that noble Princess Phionia will be aiming for the best class, Class A. She rebukes him for trying to flatter her, and again threatens to have him expelled. However, Ed interjects, stating that without his help, she will never be able to enter Class A. He also adds that if his words are lies, she can have him expelled. He tells her that if she goes to the lake in the southeast of the forest, she will find a small grassy island. There, in the middle of the island, stands Meryl's guardian tree, where she will find a present he left behind. Phionia follows his directions and is mystified to find a golden bead hidden exactly where he said it would be. She cannot understand it. She had always known Ed Roth Taylor to be a liar and a charlatan. However, the Ed she just encountered was different. She is at a loss for words as she stares at the bead. The class placement test officially ends, and Professor Glass asks all students to present the beads they have acquired. Some students show up with a collection of ridiculous beads in various colors. Some even return with fruits and eggs. Professor Glass informs these students that they will start in Class F. The test wasn't about simply finding any magic bead. After all, only those who found beads of the highest magical power, the golden beads, qualified for Class A. Only 3 students found golden beads. The first is Ziggs, a rough boy with red eyeliner and green eyes. The second is Lural, a red-headed hottie with green eyes and a cat-like smile. And lastly, the one who found a bead at Meryl's guardian tree, one with an unusually high magical power. The person who found this bead would be recognized as the top of the class, and it seems the princess is ready to accept that title. Meanwhile, Ed regrets his decision to help the princess. His fish is burnt, and he no longer has the strength to wield his spear. However, he has managed to upgrade his crafting abilities and create a fishing rod. He thinks about the third princess of the empire, Phionia. Since childhood, she had seen through flattery and deception, sharpening her insight skill over time until it became a powerful ability. No one can escape her insight, so he had no choice but to give her authentic information. Unfortunately, this has led to an even greater problem for our hero. In the original story, the prideful Princess Phionia was supposed to fail the class placement test, an event that would lead to her earning the title the Princess of Love. However, if Phionia, who holds significant influence over the early scenario, finds a golden bead and enters Class A, the original story's timeline will collapse. Even if Ed manages to avoid expulsion, all the knowledge he has about future events could become useless if the story changes too much. And if that happens, he's doomed. Fortunately for him, the title of top of the class is awarded to a girl named Lucy Merrill, a small, silver-haired witch who is deeply asleep in class. The future has not changed. Phionia stomps out of class, deep in thought. Her ability to see the truth through insight had never failed her, and there really was a bead at the tree. However, her hands shook with rage because she could not accept it. The reason she had hidden her identity in the first place was that she feared the embarrassment of receiving special treatment if it were exposed. She truly wanted to prove herself and knew, just by seeing the bead, that it would offer her the best results on the test. Yet, that was exactly why Phionia could not bring herself to accept such a gift, because finding it was not something she had accomplished on her own. The title Princess of Love, that she was destined to receive in the future, was one she wanted to earn only by walking the righteous path. So, with her head down, she turned away from the opportunity before her. Ed threw bait at the princess, knowing it would not matter whether it was the truth or a lie. Even if Ed Rothtailor believed that the princess would fail the test, she had confidence in her success and looked forward to rubbing it in his face. However, that confidence crumbled when she was unable to find another bead. This meant that her rival had never lied to her. Since she could not enter Class A without the item he had directed her to, the princess punched the wall in rage. This meant she had to keep her end of the deal and could not get him expelled. Still, she swore to keep her eyes on him. Meanwhile, Ed celebrated, having finally caught a fish even bigger than the sardines he had caught last time. He now lived in a place where he had to start running early in the morning to get to school on time, as there was no transportation to take him back and forth from his wooden tent. But then again, he was willing to make the effort. He raced back to school, overjoyed to return to the splendor and joy of Sylvania Academy. The school opening ceremony began, and the announcers expressed their delight at seeing the students' progress before starting the new semester. As they spoke, the students were invited to enjoy the food prepared for them. However, as the announcer continued, Ed heard the sweet whispers of his haters welcoming him back. Nobody looked happy to see him return. They wondered how he had the audacity to attend the opening ceremony and questioned why he had come back at all. Yet Ed did not care. He was focused on one thing, getting the chance to eat rich, flavorful meat. He devoured many plates like a pig, indifferent to the shocked stares he received. His goal was graduation, and he would not let their judgment affect him. Still, the side characters continued whispering about his disgraceful behavior and lack of manners. Some even admitted that he felt a bit different. A group of girls whispered excitedly about desserts being prepared by the head chef of Off's Hall and hurried over to the table where they were being served. A pretty girl with long brown pigtail braids and a bow in her hair remarked that something about Ed Rothtailor seemed different. Meanwhile, the protagonist himself simply wished for nothing unusual to happen. Moving on, a bright blue sky marked the beginning of another brand new day at Sylvania Academy. It was the first day of school in the new semester. A welcome speech was delivered to the new students in the grand hall, with the speaker expressing excitement at seeing them in a new and improved form. It seemed the academy was eager to mold them into functional members of society. However, things were not going smoothly for everyone. On the very first day of school, Ed found himself in the dean's office. He had nearly failed to start the school year at all, almost getting expelled on day one. He had not expected Phionia to report him, especially after their little encounter in the forest. Fortunately, the dean was a rather cheerful man, much to Ed's surprise. The cranky old man spoke with a smile on his face the entire time. Ed reasoned that Phionia must not have said anything too damaging, as he had narrowly avoided expulsion. Determined to be more cautious, he breathed a sigh of relief, with a look of resolve. He prepared to ensure that the story did not stray from the original, as his peaceful and comfortable life depended on it. Thanks to the survival skills he had honed, he had achieved the combat abilities of a novice fighter, with his specialty being the bow, though he was only at level 1. He had also trained in magic appropriate for a student in the Faculty of Magic, aiming to achieve the best combination of survival skills and magical prowess. For his needs, no weapon was better suited than a bow. Using his combined skills, he hunted game to survive. As his life skills improved, he also became more proficient at crafting high-quality arrows. He'll soon be able to cast spirit or magic formulas onto his arrows. For now, he'll just hunt rabbits and keep practicing because spirit formulas are still beyond his current capabilities. In the middle of his hunt, Ed pauses when he sees an enchanting beauty seated beneath a tree, her hair flowing in the wind. It is the brunette with pigtails, sitting with a book in her hands and a pile of books stacked before her. This beautiful young woman is Janica Failover. She is in her second year, just like Ed, except she is also the top student in her class and a genius spirit sorcerer. Unlike Ed, the beauty glances up, her ruby eyes sparkling. She spots him and remarks that he must be the amusing guy Meralda was talking about, Meralda being the name of the tree. Surprisingly, though she's heard of him, Janica is actually happy to see him and jovially introduces herself. Ed is shocked when she immediately invades his personal space with a bright, happy smile on her face. She asks if he's surprised that she knows all about him, joking that she must seem like some kind of creepy stalker. She then explains that this forest is the territory of Meralda, a high-ranking spirit, and it turns out that Meralda is a huge gossip. She's told Janica so much about Ed. Ed is stunned that the master of the forest even has enough free time to talk about him to strangers. Janica laughs and explains that Meralda is just naturally nosy, as if that wasn't already obvious. Meralda's attention is spread all over the place, so it makes sense that she'd be aware of an unwanted visitor. Ed is slightly hurt at being classified as unwanted in his newfound home. Then again, he did kill a lot of animals and cut down so many trees. Just thinking about it makes him feel a little depressed. Janica notices the awkwardness her tactless statement has caused and quickly tells Ed not to sweat the small stuff. She reassures him that it's just a natural order of things. Creatures in the forest catch and eat each other. Meralda doesn't care about that, so Ed has no reason to worry. Ed is a little touched by her words and even blushes, noting that even the great master of the forest has a tender heart. Meanwhile, the more Janica looks at him, the more she realizes that Ed actually looks kind of hot. Living in the wild might not have done wonders for his hygiene, but his beauty stats have definitely upgraded. Janica laughs and agrees that it's kind of unexpected that Meralda is such a softie. Then, excitedly, she hurries to show him something cute and adorable, a creature she signed a contract with just yesterday. A sparkle of light manifests in her hands, and she asks Ed if he wants to try touching it. Ed is surprised to see the glowing light and wonders if it is a contract spirit. If he wants to become friends with Janica, now would be the perfect time to chime in. Instead, he lowers his head and says that he doesn't understand what she means, because he cannot see spirits. Janica is shocked, staring at him in heartbroken surprise. Ed turns away, saying that he only came out to get food, so he'll be leaving now. He knows that only by following the original storyline can he maintain his informational advantage. Janica Failover is a character of significant importance in the original plot. Someone he must never get close to, because the future has something incredibly haunting in store for her. Without another word, he walks away, leaving her behind. Janica sadly watches him go, deep in thought. She remembers that Meralda had certain assumptions about Ed, and now she realizes they were right. As she strokes the white, furry chin of the forest master, who has taken the form of a giant, wolf-like creature, she contemplates Ed's existence. No matter how much she thinks about it, She can't believe that Ed truly can't see her. Who exactly is he? She had tried so hard to be kind to him, yet he simply responded with a dull yep and walked off. Embarrassed, she buries her face in Meralda's fur and squeals in frustration. Still, she takes comfort in the fact that this won't be their last encounter. After all, they attend the same school and are in the same grade. She can always find out more about him later. Meanwhile, Ed makes his way back home. The distance between his shelter and the student area is not close at all. It's practically a treasure maps journey from point A to point B. He had barely made it to school on time, even after leaving at dawn and running at full speed. Just commuting to school is something ridiculous, but at least it increases his stats, so it's worth doing. In order to win the scholarship, he has to study harder than ever before. Since he has no money, he writes on a stone slab using a burnt stick and borrows books from the student library. My guy has literally regressed to the Stone Age just to excel academically. On his way home, he washes the sweat from his clothes in a stream. One would think that would conclude his daily chores, but he's just getting started. Life as a broke student isn't easy. He has to check if he still has enough firewood, drinking water, and jerky for his next day's lunch. Because of these extra chores, he only gets about 4 hours of sleep per night. Yet, none of that is what bothers him the most. What truly bothers him is the fact that the entire time he's struggling, Janica keeps following him, keeping a close eye on him like he's her own personal, amusing little circus monkey. He immediately calls her out for following him around, and she looks shocked that she got discovered, even though she wasn't any good at hiding in the first place. He yells that it would be weirder if he didn't notice her awful sneaking skills. Enraged, he asks Janica if she is not aware of his identity. He is Ed Roth, the worst hooligan to exist, and he doesn't understand why she keeps hanging around him. However, Janica points out that the hooligan label is just what other people think of him, and she wants to make her own judgment. She sparkles like the sun as she smiles at him, blinding him with her pure beauty. However, Ed is even more disturbed. He recalls that Janica is the kind of person who looks naive and dumb on the outside, but she is very independent-minded and always likes to form her own opinions. However, none of that is going to change the dark future in store for her. Ed just can't respond with a refreshing smile on his face when he knows what's coming. This is because the sweet and angelic Janica Failover ends up growing into the final boss of Act 1. She is the only character who would smile at a scumbag like Ed Roth. It hurts him to have to push her away, but he cannot mess with the plot because he needs things to go smoothly in order to succeed. Ed reminds himself that he is a villain, even though he never wanted to go too far. So he says, in that case, since destiny brought us together, can you do me a favor? Janica is delighted that he's asked for a favor and asks with excitement, sparkling in her eyes, what she can do for him. Ed explains that he is a mess right now. He's been disowned by his family and is in a huge pinch. So he asks if she can give him some money. Ed temporarily turns into the beggar he feared becoming. Janica is so shocked that she briefly turns to stone, her smile frozen on her face. Quickly, he tries to retain his dignity and steels himself, saying that, of course, he will pay her back as soon as he's back on his feet. The truth is that Ed knows that every year, Janica gets a scholarship for being at the top of the class. But that doesn't just signify her excellence. Her background is so poor that, without the scholarship, the angelic beauty of the school wouldn't be able to continue her education. In other words, she's just as broke as he is. Janica, the sweetest daughter from a small ranch, has one great weakness: money. The poor girl is so shocked, standing in the clearing at a loss for words. Her stone-frozen figure starts to fade away as she apologizes in pain and despair because she cannot help at all, exactly as Ed predicted. He hopes that, with this, he has successfully cut Janica Failover out of his life. It has been 3 days, and he has finally been left in peace. Of course, Ed doesn't feel good about purposely asking Janica for the one thing she cannot provide, but he doesn't want to get entangled with the important characters anymore. He should carry on his quiet, peaceful life of living and hunting in the forest. He has to be careful so that the story doesn't stray from the original. He finally makes it home and is about to enter his wooden tent when he freezes in shock. Inside his tent, he finds a character with an even heavier presence than Janica. the subject of marvel among all her classmates and even professors, the rare genius and the most powerful character in the game, the failed swordsman of Sylvania, Lucy Merrill. He finds Lucy Merrill sleeping inside his tent, and she wakes with a tired yawn. He is horrified to see her there and wonders what she is even doing in this mountain valley. Lucy mumbles that he is so loud that she can't sleep. Ed is about to ask what he did that was so loud, but the sleepy girl says she's not talking about him. She is, in fact, talking about the wolf behind him that is as big as a house. It keeps talking to him. Ed's eyes widen to saucers in shock, and there is a bright light behind him. It is Merrill, the forest master. She is a mighty creature,